Hello, it's Rob here, of course, with Rob, and that means you are listening to the Property Podcast. This week, we're looking at your deals.
Yes, happy December. Can't believe it's December. Thank you for joining us on the Property Podcast. We're doing something a bit new today. We've never tried this before. It could be a disaster. It might especially be a disaster because we were out with all the meetup leaders last night and we're not feeling at our absolute freshest, but we'll see how it goes. We're looking at your deals. We're doing it live. Let's see how it goes.
I've got strong coffee, Rob. We'll be okay.
Yep. And even if it's a rubbish podcast and you waste half an hour of your life, you can still have a good time tonight because meetups are on. So if you haven't got along to a meetup recently, make sure it happens. There is still time. Just go to thepropertyhub.net/meetups. And that's where you'll find a listing of everything that's going on around the country, more than 30 of them. So there's bound to be one near you. Book your place completely free. Go along and you might meet one of us if you're in either South Essex or St Albans.
You certainly will. Mr. D will be in South Essex, I'll be in St Albans, and we hope to see you there. And I'm sure a few people will be discussing the autumn statement that was released last week. Now, it's not really much of a statement, it's more of a mini budget. Probably one of the best things that came from it was the fact that they said they're going to stop it after next year. So that was one of the best pieces of news from the autumn statement. So at least we get a break from what seems to be continuing bad news for property investors. This time, well, we had the traditional, we're going to build more homes, but as we said before we started recording, it'll actually be news when they actually do that rather than just talk about it, but every single chancellor talks about it. Something to reflect on though, Rob, and this one we're directly linked to, not just as investors, but as people who own a letting agency, is the fact that letting agent fees are going to be axed.
Yes, they are, following in the footsteps of Scotland, who did this a few years ago. So this doesn't mean that all letting agents are going to shut up shop overnight. It just means that agents can't charge fees upfront to tenants. So basically, the landlords are going to end up paying for letting agents' services. So while there were no nasty tax bombshells for landlords in the statement, it does mean that letting agents, a lot of letting agents, are likely to put up their fees to landlords. Because reading between the lines, I think what's happened over recent years is that letting agents have been competing for business with landlords by reducing their fees and passing those fees on to tenants. And now they're not going to be able to do that anymore. So at Yellow, I mean, we only charge a pretty token fee to tenants. It's way lower than the average and way lower than some of the things that you see, like some London agents charging over £500. I mean, it is ridiculous. So, I mean, I'm never a fan of banning things and restricting people's freedoms, but I do see why they've done it. Because from a tenant's perspective, you go and you find the house that you want to live in, and if you're unlucky enough that you've got a rip-off agent attached to that, there's not a lot that you can do about it. So I do see why they've done it, or more accurately, doing it. They're consulting on it, so who knows whether it might get modified or something like that. But it might mean higher costs for landlords. A lot of people are saying that, that'll just get passed on to tenants, but with rents going up, which I don't buy at all. But we'll have to see how that one pans out.
We will. And we're going to have to see how this episode pans out. We have no idea how this is going to go, and we'd like your feedback. We're going to look at some deals now, and we're pretty much going to record it live. So what that means is we're not going to stop and then carry on and then stop and carry on. We're just going to go through the deal as we would. You're going to hear us typing. So it's going to be real. We're going to be looking at links, and we're going to be discussing what we find. If this is interesting, let us know. If it's pants, let us know. We don't want to do it again if you don't like it. But we thought we'd try this. It's going to be interesting for us because we're looking at the deals. We'll try and be as descriptive as we can, but obviously without giving too much away about the deals as well and protecting the interests of the people who've kindly submitted them. So we're going to look at the first deal, and the first deal is from Vanessa. And Vanessa's looking at Bradford, an area that I've personally invested in, as you might have heard a few weeks ago, an area I believe in for several reasons, and we'll probably talk about that in a minute. But first of all, let's set the scene. So Vanessa's looking at a 3-bed property. It's priced at just over 110. And the first question we've asked Vanessa is, what sort of money are you hoping to get this for? So Vanessa would like to get in at 88. Now, that's great, and I commend her going for a better price, and maybe that's realistic. I don't know if the seller's going to be motivated enough to get it for 88, but you should always try. What's really interesting, Rob, is the level of rent. So purchase price suggested at 110. Vanessa's hoping to get it around the 90 mark, but rent at 830 per month.
Yeah, that's got to be a kind of an HMO or a house share, right? So I haven't dug into it yet. I don't know if you've got it open, but that sounds very high to me.
Yeah, so I've had a look at the local area. I've got Rightmove up now, and looking at other rents within quarter of a mile, there's not many 3-beds, if any, but I'm looking at the most expensive 2-beds, and there's nothing above 750. Well, there's a couple, but you can get ones in the same block for under that. So there's nothing over 800, that's for sure. And although these are 2-beds, the spec of these ones I'm looking at are far superior to the one Vanessa's looking at. Don't get me wrong, the property Vanessa is looking at is in a perfectly acceptable standard, but you wouldn't call it high spec. You know, it's a decent property that's ready to let, and it's a nice, clean-looking property. But it's definitely not a high-spec property. So I agree. There doesn't seem to be any evidence that as a single let, it could command the rent that it's being stated at right here. So at $830 a month, it does seem like that's a share. Now, whether that's 2 or 3 individuals, I'm not too sure. That's the first thing I'd be looking into, Vanessa. Is this let as a single let, or is the rent being collected from 3 individuals? Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It just means that you should be aware of it and also investigate, okay, well, if I did just let this to, one person, a professional or professional couple on a single let, what would I get? Sometimes a current rent might not be a realistic rent and it's making the deal look slightly better than it is. I'm not saying that's the case, but that's what I'll be looking into.
Here's an interesting angle on it. We asked as well, why do you like this deal? Why are you putting this our way? And she said that the location is really strong, which it looks like it is. It's extremely central. And she said that as a result, in the future, there's the potential to use it for serviced accommodation. She said at the moment, it seems like there isn't a market for it, but with all the regeneration that's going on, potentially it could work for serviced accommodation in the future. So I quite like that. If you get something that works well now, and then you've got an extra option of doing something with it in the future to make the figures work even better, then that could be a nice little angle on it.
So then we've gone on to ask Vanessa what are her concerns. Why she put this in front of us? There seems to be a lot going for it. So why has she put this to us? And Vanessa's highlighted that she believes the area could be a risky location. So the historical data suggests that, you can lose money in Bradford. And the distance from her own home in Cambridge makes her a little nervous as well. In her opinion, the area is not an attractive one. Obviously, that's a subjective thing. Doesn't look too bad to me. But let's first of all zoom right in on the historic data. If a property hasn't been kicking on recently, in some ways that doesn't put me off. And in others, if I'm following the cycles of nearby towns and cities that have already started to push on, I can be encouraged. Because if it's been undervalued for a while and prices haven't moved for a while, the fundamentals are there, which we discussed they are, and the yield is there, then that often is an indicator for capital growth in the future. It's not a guarantee, but it's an indicator. If you can find fundamentals and a really strong yield, which is what you have here, Vanessa, then you've certainly got the potential for capital growth. So I wouldn't be put off too much by the past performance of Bradford. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I've invested in Bradford this year, because I'm actually encouraged by the capital growth prospects, because it's so undervalued now compared to its neighbour Leeds. And Leeds, I still think, has got loads and loads of legs left in it, but Leeds has started to move slightly now. Bradford hasn't, and it might be a couple of years before it does. But it's not hard to see properties like the one you're looking at being worth, double in the not distant future, whatever distant means to you. But, to see a property like that, 90k for 3 bedrooms and bang in a city centre in 10 years' time, 180 doesn't scare me to say those type of things. So yeah, I think don't rule it out for that reason. The big one, and this is common, Rob, is investing away from your home.
Yeah, she's flagged that up as a question to us. It's like, is this something that we think she should do? We've recorded an episode on investing from a distance, which we'll link to in the show notes. So all the links for today are going to be at thepropertyhub.net/yourdeals. So in there, will be a link to the episode about investing remotely. It comes up a lot. And yes, there are unique challenges, but there are opportunities as well. In that episode, we go into exactly the things you need to be careful of and how to overcome some of the challenges. Most importantly, she also asks, do Yellow Lettings manage properties in Bradford? Yes, we do. So go ahead, buy the property and bring it to us. But not if it's a multi-let, because we don't do those.
Don't like that hard work stuff.
No. And I think this is a good opportunity as well to echo a point that we made when we were talking about Bradford and when we were talking about our deals a couple of weeks ago, which is that in sort of what we'll call secondary areas at the moment where there's potential for growth, location is everything. So there are lots of parts of Bradford that you are not going to want to invest in and that will probably never or not for a very long time see the benefits of anything that is going on in terms of infrastructure. But this one, Vanessa's clearly got it right. She's looking extremely centrally, and that's not a concern for this one. But it is worth bearing in mind because, you don't want to sort of hear on the podcast, oh, Bradford's the new place, and then just go off and buy an absolute shocker somewhere on the outskirts that is going to be a real pain to manage. But Vanessa clearly knows that, and she's gone and found something very interesting. So who knows? I noticed it's only gone onto the market about a month ago as we're recording this. The price hasn't been dropped yet. So maybe as Christmas approaches, they're starting to get a bit twitchy. They want to get an offer in before Christmas, so it's not just sitting there languishing for another month. Maybe time to put in that offer of 88 and see what response you get.
Well, I enjoyed that, Rob. I feel like we're warming up. I think we should do another one. Thanks, Vanessa. Who's next?
Okay, next up we've got Phil. Thank you, Phil, for sending this in. Phil sent us a property in Bristol that he's looking at. It's a 3-bed terrace which is listed at 210,000, and he thinks it's going to rent for about £900 a month. And he's looking at it as a long-term rental, so something to just buy and hold for the long term. So looking at this a bit, Bristol obviously is a very strong area. It's performed extremely well in recent years. It's very popular. Looking at this property, from the photos, which obviously you can't see, it looks like it's a nice property, but a bit tired. It needs a little bit of work doing to it, especially in the kitchen. So you need to budget probably about £10,000 or so for going and doing all that. At a purchase price of £210,000, is it good value? Well, looking at the properties that are nearby on the market now, it looks like it is more or less. There's on the same street, there's one on at 235, another at 220. So it seems like it's sort of in the ballpark in relation to what's currently on the market. But I've just gone in and looked at previous sales on this actual street. So very good comparables because it's in exactly the same location. And in 2005, there was a 3-bed terrace, so exactly the same, sold for 177,000, and another one for 155,000. Looking at it, I haven't looked in massive detail, but they do appear to be the same type of property in roughly the same sort of condition. So that is a really big jump from like 177-ish up all the way up to 210. That implies to me that a lot of the growth has already happened. And given that the yield on the face of it looks quite low, there's going to be limited potential for it to go that much further anytime soon. But Rob, I know you've been looking at the rent side of it while I've been doing that.
Yeah, so I've dug in a bit. Phil's put a rent down of 900. And in the immediate area, there's not a lot for let. Digging a bit deeper, though, I've looked at some that have previously let. And there are 3 beds around that sort of money, but they are in really good condition. So if Phil was going to go for this one, he'd need to, as Rob had mentioned, bring it up to standard and spend probably at least another 10 grand. So I do believe 900 is achievable if the money is spent on the property. In its current state, no, you'd have to accept a lot less and possibly not the tenant you'd wish for. So a 900 rent on a 210 purchase price is a pretty poor yield, a pretty poor return. Not something that I'd be getting excited about. But if the area and the fundamentals are incredible, it could be something to look at. However, looking at that, the fundamentals, the things that are around it, the transport links, the shops, the schools, the rest of it, some of it's there. But one of the things that concerns me, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a deal breaker, but it's something that would be definitely a warning sign to me, is that the nearest train stations are over 2.5 miles away. So, not perfect. And I think possibly what Phil's trying to do here is still trying to find value in Bristol, because I'm making the assumption that's the area he likes to invest. So looking at some of the things Phil's mentioned, why does he like the deal? He believes it'll rent well for the long duration. Yeah, I'm sure you probably will get tenants in this area. It seems like a nice looking area. His concerns are limited capital growth, which is Rob's touched on, and of course a growth yield, and we don't like growth yields, we look at net normally, but a growth yield of only 5% is very, very low. But the questions Phil's got is, because of the yield, should I even bother going and view it? Well, I probably wouldn't. But it depends. If you've got a lot of free time, Phil, and you like wandering around properties, then go for it. But the point he's made here, and I think this is a lesson we can draw from this, is achieving higher yields in Bristol seems very difficult. And that doesn't come as a shock to me at all, because Bristol's been, pushing on. Rob said, there's a bit of a track record in terms of prices moving up in Bristol. So those low yields don't surprise me whatsoever. But this happens for a lot of people. Their target area at some point during the cycle becomes expensive, and therefore the opportunities, the yields, the best deals are no longer there. And some people just dig in, work hard, and still try and extract some value. But you can make life easier for yourself. You can look in the surrounding areas and go, okay, so where's the nearest town and city? We talked about Bradford before being close to Leeds. Where's the next place? Where's the next town or city I can look at for value? Now, I'm not saying that they're these places, but you've got, on one motorway going out of the city, you've got Newport, and going the other way, you've got Swindon. I know they're a lot cheaper. They haven't kicked on as much. A completely different profile in terms of, your buy-to-lets and what you're going to be doing there. But something to consider. If you are struggling to find things in Bristol, maybe look at the next area. Consider an area that hasn't kicked on as much yet, because that ripple effect will probably occur at some point.
All right. Thank you very much, Phil, for sending us that one. I hope you found that useful, even though it wasn't great news, but hopefully you seem to know that it wasn't a great one. So hopefully we've given you an idea for where you can go looking for a little bit more value. Okay, so I think we'll just do one more. This might be absolutely... Well, I have no idea how this is going to sound. This might be awful. We're just we're having a great time just sitting here going through Rightmove, but this may or may not work. So I think we'll just do one more. Let us know what you think. And we've got loads and loads more that people have sent in. So we can do another one in a few weeks if you think it's any good. So let's just fit one more in. This is from Ben, and he sent us an interesting property in Bedford. It's a 4-bed. It's listed at 230. I can see it's actually been reduced it went on in April at 250. It was reduced just recently to 230. And he says that he knows, because he knows the vendor, which is a good sign, that he can get it for 190. So if that's the case, then that's fantastic. So he's looking to buy for 190. He thinks it'll rent for £1,000 a month. It's a town centre location. He says he's already got a family ready to move in. So it sounds like he is already operating in this area. He knows it. He's got some contacts because he's got people ready to move in. And he says he knows who the vendor is. And his intention here is to refinance his money out of this property to use it for the next deposit. So the BMV part is critical here, because he needs to be getting a deal in order to pull his money out and use it again for the next one. Now, it might have been an asking price of 230 and he's getting it for 190. So that seems really good. But of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's worth 230 just because they're asking for it. So, Rob, have you dug into the local house prices at all?
Yeah, this is a really interesting deal, because you can't see it, listeners, but this property is a different looking type of terrace. So it's listed as a terrace, 4-bed terrace, and technically it is. But beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And in my eye, this one's a bit ugly. It's not a traditional terrace. It doesn't have character. So I can see why potentially it's struggled to sell. I really do like that Ben can see past the emotion of this deal, of, the curb appeal, and see that he can get a good return and the fundamentals are strong. My concern is the refinancing aspect of it. If Ben's looking to spend money on it and bring the standard up, then possibly he might be able to refinance money out. But relying on it being valued up in 6-12 months' time, depending on when he comes back to look at this deal, at refinancing it, to rely on that, I'd say, is risky, because there aren't any like-for-like type properties that are on the market right now and are likely to sell. There are other 4-bed terraces, but not the same type of terrace. It looks very different. And I believe a valuer would struggle to say, well, they are the same, so therefore this is sold for more, so you can have more. Valuers like to find reasons, it seems, not to value a property up. And I think they can find plenty of reasons and excuses, rightly or wrongly, on this deal. So I'd say that's a risk. So if you're asking, is this a good deal without the refinancing aspect? Yeah, it looks pretty solid. The price looks good, the return looks good, the location looks good. There's plenty going on for this property. There's lots of boxes ticked. There's fundamentals. It's got all sorts. And the fact you've got a family ready to move in shows the rental demand. The risk here, Ben, is the BMV aspect of it and getting that money back out. If you're going to spend money on improving the property and making it more valuable, then fantastic. That's one way. But relying on the valuers to see your point of view that you've got a really strong deal without like-for-like sales going on, I think it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, it could be. So I'd really dig into what it's worth now to make sure that you're actually getting it BMV, and think carefully about when you're going to want to get that money back out. If it's something that you really need to do in a short period of time, there's a bit of a risk. If it's a case that you're happy to wait a couple of years, and so you think you're getting a good deal, you're confident about that, and values are increasing in the area, so in a couple of years' time, you'll be in a better position anyway, then that won't be such a worry. Also, just looking at it, the fundamentals on this one do look great. It's half a mile from Bedford station, so it's really central, but it's also like practically backing onto a big park. There's schools nearby that I can see a college. So in terms of rentability, the fact there's already someone wanting to rent it proves this, but it looks extremely rentable. So yeah, as you say, Rob, it's just that refinancing aspect. It's always a risk. People talk about, I'm just going to do this and pull my money back out. But it's not as easy as it sounds, and especially not as easy as it sounds because you're relying on valuers. And even if you do everything right, he could have just got out of bed the wrong side and come down and value it at what you bought it for no particular reason. So there's always risk in these situations. Just do what you can to mitigate that risk. And think how happy you'd be with it if you couldn't necessarily pull all your money out. If you could maybe just get half of it back out again, would you still be happy with it? If you would, then go for it, because it looks like a really solid rental that won't cause you any difficulty. It's going to be a good one for the long term.
So I'll put you on the spot, Rob. 3 deals, all very different. If you had to buy one, you were forced to buy one of these, which one is it?
Oh, great question. I'd go for this last one. So I definitely wouldn't go for Bristol because the yield's too low. I would absolutely be tempted by Bradford because I do like a bit of high yield, and I think it's sort of, if she gets it at the price she's looking for, it's sort of knocking on for 12% gross yield, which obviously is really high. But I just don't know enough. I don't know enough about the area there. So if I was feeling like a bit of a gamble, then that's the one I'd go for because I can see the future prospects for it. But today I'm feeling a bit more safe, and so I'd go for this last one. It looks like a really solid buy-to-let in a good location. So give it a good refurb, collect the rent, see what I could do with it in a couple of years' time. Happy days. What about you?
Well, listeners, you're probably not going to be shocked, but it's not too different. Once again, we agree. I would have felt my time was wasted if I'd spent more than 10 minutes looking at the Bristol deal, never mind viewing it. So, sorry, Phil, but definitely not the Bristol deal. I think it's close between the other two. I'd say the Bradford one's the wild card. Even though I've invested in Bradford recently, it's in a property that probably more suits the location. It's a 2-bed apartment. It kind of works. The 3-bed properties that Vanessa was looking at, there's no market for it in terms of proven market for it. Now, that could mean it could do absolutely brilliant or it could bomb a bit. And I think it's got the potential for the biggest upside, but it just depends whether you're brave or not. I think the last deal from Ben, it's just solid and safe, isn't it? Town centre fundamentals there, respectable yield. You're not going to be, bragging about it for years to come, but you're certainly not going to be crying over it either. So I think that's the safest and most solid choice. But if I was in a more adventurous mood, I might go for the Bradford one. And if I was greedy, I'd try and do both. But there we go.
So there you go. 3 deals, all very different. Let's know what you thought of that. We really enjoyed doing that. Whether it comes across in audio form when you actually can't see what we're looking at, we don't know. So please get over to the Property Hub. Let us know what you think of that. It's something we can do in the future. Or if you prefer, we'll never speak of it again. We'll pretend it never happened and we'll move on to something else next week. But do let us know. get over to the propertyhub.net/forum and give us the truth. We can handle it.
Tell you what, Rob, you know what else we can handle? 5-star reviews.
Oh, yes, we prefer that.
So a big thank you to Trevor. And Trevor says, I met Rob at the Property Investor Show today, and I promised that I'd place a review for the podcast, which is very much overdue. I'm an investor in Hertfordshire, and I've listened and learned from the Property Podcast since the earliest episodes. Even for seasoned investors, there's much to learn from these guys, always delivered in a very genuine way. How refreshing to find experts in the field that don't have any hidden agenda, but are just passionate about sharing in their many experiences. Keep it up, guys. You're a real asset to the industry. Best wishes, Trevor from Letchworth. Well, thank you, Trevor. That is very kind. Apologise that it's taken till now to read that review out, because you left it in April, but it is very much appreciated, and it was great to meet you at the show too.
Yeah, he didn't say which Rob he met, but it must have been you if you're bullying him for a review, because you always do that to everyone.
Oh, yeah, I am the review bully. You haven't left a review? Sorry, no advice. These say we're nice, Rob, but in real life we're terrible. No, I'm only kidding.
Okay, so let's have a resource of the week to thank Trevor for that review and to thank you for bearing with us in this experimental episode. This week's resource is called Panic Guard. It's an app, and it's a security app. It's available for iTunes and Android. And basically, the idea is that if you're out and about, so maybe you're going off to show people around a property that you're letting or something like that, and you're concerned about your safety, what you can do is choose someone in your contacts to get alerted if you activate the alarm. So all you need to do is shake your phone, it'll sound an alarm, and it'll not only like sort of go off there and then, but it'll also alert whoever it is that you've nominated. You can do extra things with that as well. So for example, you can set a timed alarm that you need to deactivate. So if you haven't turned the alarm off in half an hour, alert the people in your contacts because something might have happened to you. You can also have them track your journey with GPS. So it looks like a really useful tool. It's free, and there are always security risks where if you're going to be out and about doing viewings, meeting people you never met before. So if you are worried about that kind of thing, or you've got a family member who's off doing that kind of thing and you're worried about them, it's worth a look. So completely free, Panic Guard, and we will be linking to that in the show notes for this episode, which are this week at thepropertyhub.net/yourdeals.
It's a very grown-up resource of the week, for us anyway. It sounds interesting. I'll check it out, especially if we go and view some of these properties that we're looking through, Rob. Some of them in more interesting areas I've seen, so maybe we'll need this ourselves. Next week, we're back to normal. You're going to like this, because these are always popular. These are tried and tested. We know from the feedback you love this. It's looking at stuff that we've done that's gone wrong. So next week we're going to look at when property goes wrong. We've covered this before in more general terms, but next week we're going to get specific about things that have gone wrong for us. Not, over years, but this very year. Yes, things go wrong in property. Because we have quite a few properties between us, we can draw on our own experiences this year and tell you about the things that have been more challenging for us in our portfolios. So we'll be talking about that next week. I think that will be very popular. I think people like that sometimes more than our wins, Rob. And, got this great deal. Yeah, but tell me about what went wrong.
And my goodness, I've got so much to moan about. I hope you've set aside 3 hours to record this one, because wow, stuff has gone wrong recently. And yeah, it's going to be Schadenfreude overload. I don't blame people for enjoying those more. I think I would as well. So that's going to be a good one next week. Thankfully, though, the meetups are tonight, not next week, so you won't be coming along and laughing at us in person. But you can come along and see us see me in South Essex or Rob in St Albans tonight, or go to any of our other 30-odd meetups, thepropertyhub.net/meetups. Book your place, get along, it's your last chance this year. Celebrate the beginning of the run into Christmas by getting along and talking about property with lots of friendly people.
And hopefully some mulled wine, if your local venue has that. I hope St Albans has, but I know they've got mince pies, so that's good enough for me. Right, we'll be back next week with some of our nightmare dealings. We'll, of course, be back with Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday. Until then, keep yourself busy with the meetups and the propertyhub.net. It's free, it's full of wonderful people sharing advice and loads of resources, so get yourself over there. But until then, have fun at the meetups for those who are going, and we'll be back next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.